In 1943, the Hawker Typhoon was a plane the RAF almost threw away. Designed to be the successor to the Hurricane, it was a massive, thundering brute of an aircraft, but it was plagued by a rogue reputation. At high speeds, the tail units were known to vibrate so violently they would simply snap off, sending pilots to their deaths without warning. The heart of the beast was the Napier Sabre engine, a complex 24-cylinder monster that was notoriously unreliable. Pilots feared it, and command doubted it. The Typhoon was a rogue in the literal sense, an unpredictable, dangerous machine that seemed more likely to kill its own pilots than the enemy. It was a fighter looking for a purpose, sitting on the edge or being scrapped until the Luftwaffe began launching high-speed tip-and-run raids that no other Allied fighter could catch.
The air over the English Channel is thick, heavy, and unforgiving. At 30,000 feet, the Hawker Typhoon was a failure, a gasping heavyweight out of its element. But down here, at the deck, the Rogue found its killing ground. The Luftwaffe's Focke-Wulf 190s were the predators of the coast, lightning-fast tip-and-run raiders that laughed at the Spitfire's climb rate. They didn't laugh at the Typhoon. When the Napier Sabre engine roared to life at sea level, it turned the airframe into a 5-ton sledgehammer. A pilot would push the throttle forward, and the 24 cylinders would scream with a violent industrial percussion. Gravity and 2,000 horsepower combined to create a diving speed that no German pilot could outrun. The hunter had become the hunted. But the RAF didn't just want a faster interceptor, they wanted a monster. They began by mounting 4 20mm Hispano cannons deep within those massive thick-set wings. When those guns fired, the recoil was so powerful it felt like the plane had slammed into a brick wall. The muzzle flashes were long enough to be seen from the ground in broad daylight. Then came the final evolution, the rails. 8 RP-3 rockets, 60 pounds of high-explosive fury each, were bolted beneath the wings. The Typhoon was no longer a graceful bird of prey. It was a flying broadside, a destroyer with wings. The mission profile changed from interception to annihilation. This was the birth of the train busters. Imagine a locomotive steaming through the French countryside, the lifeline of the Wehrmacht. Suddenly, a shadow eclipses the sun. A Typhoon drops from the clouds, screaming in a 45-degree dive at 400 miles per hour. The pilot ignores the light flak dancing around the cockpit. His thumb finds the firing button. The rockets ignite with a hiss that drowns out the engine, leaving twin trails of acrid white smoke. The boiler of the locomotive doesn't just leak, it vanishes in a geyser of superheated steam and twisted iron. The Typhoon doesn't pull away, it flies directly through the explosion. Debris rattles against the armored belly of the plane. The air is a chaotic soup of smoke, telephone wires, and German steel. The pilots called it the treetop war. There was no room for error, no space for a parachute to open, and no time to think. You flew by instinct, tethered to a monster that wanted to shake itself apart. The beast that refused to fly had found its purpose in the dirt and the fire. It was the low-level assassin, and for the German army, the sky was no longer empty. It was terrifying.
The sun rises over the airfields of Normandy, and the Rogue is no longer an outcast. It is the summer of 1944, and the Typhoon has become the backbone of the Allied advance. The low-level assassin has evolved into the total war machine. Every morning, the ground crews work in a frenzy of grease and cordite. They manhandle the massive rockets onto the rails, their hands stained by the residue of the beast.
The Napier Sabre engines roar into life across the valley, a sound that the German infantry has learned to associate with the end of the world. The Typhoon doesn't just support the army, it clears the path before it. Columns of Panther tanks, once thought invincible, now cower in the shadows of the hedgerows. They know that if they move during the day, the sky will scream. A single Typhoon wing carries the destructive power of a heavy cruiser's volley. When the rockets hit, the shockwave alone can flip a 40-ton tank onto its back. The pilots are no longer just flyers, they are cab-rank hunters, circling the battlefield, waiting for the call from the ground. Target, tank concentration, grid square 4210. The dive begins. The airframe groans under the G-force as the pilot yanks the stick back at 450 miles per hour. The ground rushes up like a green wall. The pilot waits until the last possible second, staring into the very eyes of the anti-aircraft gunners. The rockets release with a violent jerk, and the world below disappears in a wall of orange flame and black soot. The Falaise pocket becomes a graveyard of scorched metal and shattered ambitions. Thousands of German vehicles are trapped, and the Typhoon is the executioner. The roads are choked with the wreckage of an empire, all of it torn apart by the 60-pounders. But the cost of this total war is written in the casualty lists. The Typhoon is a brute, but it is a vulnerable one. Flying at 50 feet means every rifle, every machine gun, and every piece of shrapnel is a lethal threat. The radiators are massive targets. A single bullet can cause the engine to seize in seconds. There is no glory in the treetop war. There is only the grind. By the end of the war, the Typhoon has earned its place in the pantheon of legends. It was the plane that shouldn't have worked, the engine that shouldn't have run, and the tail that shouldn't have stayed on. It was the beast that refused to fly that eventually broke the back of the Wehrmacht. As the guns fall silent across Europe, the Typhoon is quietly retired. It was too violent for a world at peace, a relic of a time when the sky had to be turned into a hammer. But for those who saw the white smoke trails and heard the roar of the saber, the memory of the rogue would never fade.